So I think some of the biggest branding challenges that introverts face, first of all, wanting to even put themselves out there. The first thing that they say to me is, I don't know if I want a personal brand. And I think that that is the first mental and internal struggle that an introvert needs to get over before building their personal brand, which is, yes, you will be visible. And yes, that can be a very good thing for your career. I think also introverts struggle with, now that I've agreed, okay, I want a personal brand, where do I even start? Which platform do I pick and why? The most basic of questions with a personal brand for introverts, I always say start with one platform that makes sense for the way that you communicate.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership, where we dive into smart thinking for today's leaders so you can navigate change, build stronger teams, and reclaim your energy. And remember, for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. For this episode, I'm sitting down with the brilliant and thoughtful Goldie Chan, author of Personal Branding for Introverts. Goldie, who's founder of a branding and storytelling agency called Warm Robots, is a widely respected content creator and a trusted social media strategist for leaders and organizations around the world. She's known for helping introverts build authentic, magnetic personal brands without pretending to be extroverts. Goldie flips conventional branding advice on its head, offering a toolkit for quiet power, intentional storytelling, and sustainable visibility. Meanwhile, she's built one of LinkedIn's longest-running video series. Whether you're a coach, entrepreneur, or a quietly ambitious leader, this conversation will help you show up with clarity, courage, and authenticity. Goldie Chan, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you so much, Roger. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Now, you are known as the green-haired Oprah of LinkedIn.
Yes.
Tell us how that persona evolved.
Oh, gosh. So I will say it's very tongue-in-cheek when I use that phrase, the Oprah of LinkedIn, which Huffington Post and now when press in general refers to me, they use that phrase. So in 2017, I was in between roles. I just left a head of marketing position and I took off a month. I called it sabbatical, but that's really a great way of saying I was unemployed in a fancy way.
Sure.
And I took off a month before I was going to look for my next head of marketing or, whatever that next role would be. And during that month, I got into the LinkedIn video beta. And I started creating videos on LinkedIn. Now, when I started doing this, I thought I'm going to do a handful of videos. And when I do these handful of videos, I can then take them to my next job interview and say, look at all the amazing work I've been doing. Hire me for your next leadership role. However, I started creating videos and that one video became two video, that 2 video became 10 videos. That 10 videos became a month, became 3 months, became over 800 daily consecutive videos, which from 2017 to 2019 plus was the longest running daily video channel on LinkedIn. And I think still to date is maybe one of the longest consecutive, never interrupted.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah, daily video shows. And that was mostly me editing and creating those videos too. So, and it was in, I would say, the pre-AI era. So none of that was AI automated. It was really me making those videos. And during the course of this, Huffington Post called me the Oprah of LinkedIn because I was doing so many interviews and I was talking with, I like to say, a warm personality with people and trying to understand and hear their stories in a very specific way. So that's how I got the Oprah of LinkedIn, and I still have the green hair. So that's where the green hair comes from.
It's a great story. So tell us, how do you define personal branding, specifically for introverts?
Yes. So I like to think about personal branding in the context of the question I get the most often, which is, what is personal branding versus reputation? And to me, reputation is the story that people tell when you're not in the room. And personal branding is the story that you tell when you are in the room. And that room might be the virtual room, which
Sure.
for so many introverts is a much more comfortable and safe place to be building your personal brand.
Interesting. I like that. So what are some common misconceptions that people have about introverts in personal branding?
Well, I think I have an entire section in my book about this, but I think that people think introverts can never be loud. In fact, I want to say I might be one of the only introvert books that's come out in the last 5 years that doesn't have the word quiet in the title.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And that's very purposeful on my part because I don't think that all introverts are quiet 24/7. I think, of course, there's a reason why quiet is associated with introverts, but I think that introverts can be what I like to call loud introverts. Introverts who are incredibly excited about what they're doing. And so they are going to be louder. They're going to be more passionate about the way they express it. I know so many amazing introverts who are public speakers,
Right.
who are in very high leadership roles where they are speaking to hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of people. And so I think that that's one of the most common misconceptions about introverts is that they cannot be loud.
Well, do introverts have any particular advantage when building a brand?
Yes, I think that introverts have so many advantages. One of them, which I will call a superpower, is being able to listen deeply. So that means being able to hear and process, synthesize information, and be able to analytically offer a response. So it's that pausing, listening, and responding that's so helpful. And in addition, I think that introverts are also really wonderful at one-on-one connections. So when I think about how introverts, when they are at conferences and feel overwhelmed at conferences, that one-on-one connection that you can make there can be incredibly, incredibly powerful.
What you just said would be good advice not only for introverts, but extroverts about pausing and listening and processing.
Yes.
All of us can benefit from that. So you have created so much content, and boy, were you on a roll with 800 videos.
Thank you.
When brainstorming ideas, what is your creative process? How do you do it?
Yes. So especially I will say back then, because once again, that was a pre-AI era of coming up with ideas. And now I think you could just go into any of the AI products and just say, give me 800 ideas and they could do it in a minute. Right.
Right.
But at the time, I didn't have, I would say, that tool, that luxury to do that. So when I was thinking about ideas, a lot of it stemmed from what other people would say to me in private conversations. Once again, I am an introvert myself, so I'm having a lot of these one-on-one conversations. So I do a video on, say, visiting Disneyland, but the historical aspects of visiting Disneyland. And then somebody would say, I love that video on Disneyland. Could you also do one on the pop culture, behind the scenes of Universal Studios, of these different places also here in Los Angeles. So because of that, I guess I would say I got a lot of reader or listener or watcher requests that I was implementing into my creative process. And on top of that, I would spend time where I would block off an hour, 2 hours, and I would sit there with, and I'll show this right now, with a Post-it notepad or with my notebook, with physical media. I would sit there and I would write out 20 ideas. And it wasn't about all 20 ideas being wonderful or helpful or great, but I would write them down just to get my brain moving. And maybe I'd use 5 of those ideas. But that exercise is still something that I do to this day, which is trying to make sure that my brain doesn't atrophy and making sure that I am actively brainstorming not only with my audience, but also internally with subjects that I think are interesting.
Well, you had the advantage, maybe not of artificial intelligence, but the intelligence of a lot of the people with whom you engaged online. Yes. And so as your audience grew, you interacted with them, and they were a good source. And I love the idea of brainstorming every day, even on those days when you don't plan to post something.
Yes. I think it's helpful also to have so much imperfection in brainstorming, because I think now, especially once again with the tools that we have, people expect perfection in brainstorming. And that's not the point of brainstorming. Brainstorming is so we can get all the ideas out on the table and we can cherry pick which ones make the most sense or are the most aligned with our goals at that time. So I think that is hopefully one of the most helpful things. Is the word brain is in brainstorming. So I do wish that we would use more of our human brains with brainstorming, especially the initial part of it.
Right. We had a guest on the podcast a few weeks ago who recommended starting a business meeting with everybody putting ridiculous ideas on the table. I mean, for one, it was fun and it kind of set the tone, etc. But she said some of those so-called ridiculous ideas were not all that ridiculous. It really caused us to reconsider how we were doing some things. So you're like anybody else, I assume, in that occasionally you have creative blocks. How do you deal with those?
Yes. So especially because I'm a writer, and I'm sure you know this as well, I feel like writers have even more creative blocks than some of the other folks out there. And so I like to always, whenever I get my creative blocks, I like to pause. I like to go outside and go for a walk. I think it's so important to get your body moving because it changes your headspace. When your body is just in motion, you're not sitting here and typing away. And then I think what we end up doing is, because we have, amazing things like mobile devices that have a million websites and apps and things like that, you get in the rabbit hole of just looking at junk that doesn't help your brain move forward. Right. So I like to just put everything down, turn everything off, put everything into airplane mode, and go for a walk or sit and actually just have a conversation with someone in my inner circle that I haven't talked to in a while. Because also, once again, sometimes stepping away from what I'm stuck on is a great way to get unstuck.
Sure. Well, that reminds me of advice that Ernest Hemingway gave. He said that when he was writing a short story or a novel and he felt himself sort of getting stuck, he would map out maybe 2 or 3 bullet points of what he was going to write next, rather than write it all and then have nothing to say. And he would step away, maybe go for a walk, probably went out for a tequila or two, whatever his process was.
Yes.
But then when he came back, the pump was already primed. Yes. He would start writing, pick it up, and then it kind of flowed. So I thought that was an interesting process.
And I will say this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I did visit the Hemingway house in Key West.
Oh, did you?
Florida, and there's a lot of cats there because he loved cats. And the cats that are at the current Hemingway house,
their descendants,
are the descendants of the
Right.
original cats that he raised. And I find that just delightful. I don't know. That's just a wonderful thing that those cats have just, now they're just a local treasure that are taken by the staff that works there.
I guess that's Hemingway's feline legacy.
Yes.
So, Goldie, what are the biggest branding challenges that introverts face online?
Oh, so I think some of the biggest branding challenges that introverts face is, first of all, wanting to even put themselves out there.
Right.
I think let's go through that first. So I meet so many introverts who, first of all, have now picked up my book. So thank you so much. But the first thing that they say to me is, I don't know if I want a personal brand. I don't know that I want to even be perceived
Right.
at all. And I think that that is the first mental and internal struggle that an introvert needs to get over before building their personal brand, which is, yes, you will be visible. And yes, that can be a very good thing for your career. So that's usually the first stumbling block, I think, for any introvert building their brand online. And then I think the next thing, and I talk about this in my book quite a bit, which is overwhelm. I think that in this day and age, not just introverts, but extroverts, everyone has a sense of feeling a little bit overwhelmed because the way our news cycle moves, it moves so fast. The way social media moves, it moves so quickly. So we are primed to be constantly overwhelmed, and especially introverts. So I think also introverts struggle with, well, then now that I've agreed, okay, I want a personal brand, where do I even start? Right? Which platform do I start on? Do I start on all of them all at once, which is not the advice that I give? Or which platform do I pick and why? So starting from that, the most basic of questions with a personal brand for introverts, I always say start with one. Start with one platform that makes sense for you, that makes sense for the way that you communicate. Now, for us writers, I don't know about you, but for me, I like a platform where I can write on. So right now, that is LinkedIn and that is Threads. Both of them are places where I can share writing, and I enjoy that quite a bit. And they're also places, because I create videos, where I can share videos as well.
Right. I think a lot of introverts would be surprised at how many public figures are introverts.
Yes.
Maybe we ought to have an introvert convention or something.
Okay, I will say that one of the publishers I did not go with for my book wanted me to do a massive in-person introvert convention, which if you know introverts, that's a little bit of a silly idea.
It's kind of an oxymoron.
I think it is doable. I think it just needs a lot of very careful and thoughtful planning to make it a reality.
Yeah. Well, I personally know a number of public figures, personally, off camera.
Right.
And many of them would say they are introverts. But because of their work, because of what they need to do, because of their platform, they get out there.
Right.
And a lot of them are doing some of the things that you're talking about. Many of them aren't yet. They need to learn about you. So, Goldie, you emphasize storytelling in your
Yes.
work. How can introverts leverage storytelling without oversharing?
So I think the fear of oversharing comes through in the way that people want all of their stories to be, and I'm going to use a word here, bland. So I think that we are now experiencing the blandification of the internet in so many ways, because people start duplicating posts, they start copying trends, and then that just leads to everything becoming bland. Now, the way to add spice or flavor, and I love food, so the way we add spice and flavor back into what we create, the content that we share, is through storytelling, is through our personal journeys, our personal stories. That is so much more interesting than dry bullet points that have no relevance, that have also been regurgitated by whatever AI machine, large learning model that we're using at the time. It's our personal stories that make us so interesting. And this is why even in the best business books out there, there's always a little element of personal stories that go into them, because people still want to know about human struggle and human triumph. And when introverts are thinking about building their personal brand, I like to also use a phrase. It's called ick mountain or cringe mountain. When you're thinking about, oh, I don't want to be cringy, I don't want to be icky, I think it's helpful to still say, okay, when you're creating, you're going to need to summit cringe mountain. You're going to need to get over the idea that it's uncomfortable or unpleasant to be posting or sharing about yourself, because that's how you're going to get to your personal brand.
Well, human beings are a storytelling species.
Yes.
We love stories.
Yes.
In the years when I've done so much training of executives, I'd maybe do a two or 3 day workshop, and at the end of the first day, I would always say, "All right, let's go through the stop, start, and continue. What would you like for me to stop doing that I'm doing?" And they gratefully never said anything. "What would you like for me to start doing?" Mm-hmm. They'd have a couple of suggestions. Then, "What would you like for me to continue doing?" 100% of the time, they would say, "We want you to continue telling stories. That helps us better understand what you're teaching us." At the end of one workshop, a guy came up and handed me a piece of paper, and I said, "What's this?" He said, "Well, it's the stories you told over 2 days." There were 65 of them. Now, many of them were short, but all of them had a specific purpose to help them understand and remember a principle. So that's what's making you so successful. One of the many things. Obviously, you're so bright, that helps a bunch. You're emphasizing storytelling, and that's enabling you to connect with people.
And I want to pull out a phrase that you just said and repeat it back to you, which is purposeful storytelling, right?
Right.
Because I think we've all been in the room.
Not just to entertain. It's not about entertainment.
We've heard stories, and those stories maybe don't even have an ending. You're wondering why this story is even taking place. But when we do purposeful storytelling, when there's a point, a joke at least, right? Or a moral or a learning lesson at the end of the story, it makes our storytelling more impactful. I don't know all the rules to the Pixar storytelling offhand, but there's a reason why their movies, especially their classic movies, are so powerful.
Sure.
In that they tell these stories that have resonance and have reason behind them.
Exactly.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
Well, Goldie, in content creation, what's your take on frequency versus depth?
Oh, okay. So sometimes, and I'll say this, it's wild to me, sometimes, especially on certain platforms like, say, TikTok, you can get away with frequency over depth. You can get away with having so many posts that folks will just notice you over time. I will say, though, I am such an advocate of depth of story, right? I think it's so important to have a reason. Once again, there's some actual element of reality in what you're sharing instead of just fluff content.
Right.
And when you're on a platform like LinkedIn, I think you need both. You need to have both that frequency and that depth of content. But that being said, I did daily videos. I wouldn't wish daily videos on my worst enemy. It is not doable for most people to do daily content, especially depth-based daily content like that. But I think it is helpful to think, what is the frequency at which I could create and share content? And I'd love to bring up an idea that I share often, which is building an evergreen content bank. Building a bank of content that you could always reach into at any point in time when you don't feel like you want to be creating.
Sure. Have a reservoir of content. And there are some days, as you well know, when it's tougher to come up with content than others. So if you have an abundance of it and have it over here in a bucket ready to use, that's very helpful and reassuring to you.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what tips can you offer on the use of lead magnets?
Yeah, lead magnets are so helpful for getting people into your marketing funnel in a way that also doesn't feel quite like, please buy this, please buy this all the time, which we don't want. So I think that I always like to say, and this is an overused phrase, right? How are you offering value? But when you're thinking about a lead magnet, I'll use a phrase that I just personally like to use, which is, how are you in conversation with your customer? And a lead magnet should be the introduction to that conversation. How are you offering them something that they want to use that will benefit them, that will pull them into a conversation with you that will hopefully then lead to conversion?
Has to have value.
It has to have value. So
you've already touched on this some. What are your thoughts on personal branding during career transitions or reinventions? Now, not everybody's going to go out and during a sabbatical, as you called it, start an 800 video marathon, but
never got that next job, so I need to get that next job.
I think you're okay. But for somebody who's in a transition or a reinvention, and we hear that word a lot now, reinvention, what are your thoughts on personal branding during that kind of period?
So I like to think of your personal brand like a hub in a wheel, right? And there are spokes that come out from that hub. I think about a traditional wooden wagon wheel, and the hub is the center of that. And we have all these spokes that are the different things that we do. But at the core, our core hub should remain the same. I think we meet people who they do a variety of things. Maybe they do sports, but they also run a fashion brand, but they also do consulting, but they also do this. But at their core, their personal brand is very clear and very concise. And the helpful thing about that is then they can go out and do as many spokes, many different things with their career as possible. They can also have a reinvention. They can also have a pivot. But the core of who they are, the core of their personal brand stays the same because it's not based on only the single job or function that they do. It's maybe not based in, say, only the workplace that they're at. There's something that runs deeper than simple titles. And I think when you can have that really locked down, really clear, then when you reinvent yourself, when you pivot, it becomes a lot less confusing to people what you're doing. Because perhaps at the core, you love to help people. Perhaps at the core, you're a great leader. Perhaps at the core, you are conserving nature. Whatever that is at the core, having that element so clear will help you so that you are almost, let's just say this, pivot proof.
Right. Well, it's interesting to me how many people I've talked to who don't seem to have a clear understanding of their own brand.
Yes.
It hasn't occurred to them to focus on what they do best, what they have to offer, what is somewhat unique about what they can offer people. And in today's in fact, not just today's marketplace, every marketplace I've ever been involved with, that is critical. What sets you apart from everybody else out there? They need to talk with you, Goldie.
Yeah, I think, I was speaking with one of my mentors, which, if anyone's listening, watching this, get a mentor because mentors are great. But I was speaking with one of my mentors and they said this phrase that was so helpful for me, which is, what makes you the undeniable person for this role?
Right.
What makes you the person that we have to pick to work on this project or to do this book or to do whatever? What makes you that one out of one person? And I think so often we don't think about that. We think in the opposite direction. We think, what does the company or brand want? How can I mold myself into that? How can I squeeze myself into that box? When instead we should be thinking, what do we bring to the table that is so wonderful and so unique that they have to hire us or they have to work with us or they have to purchase our products?
Right. If you can't answer that question, you've got a problem.
Yes.
So how do you measure the success of a personal brand?
So I think that there's quite a few different ways to measure the success of a personal brand. And I'll say for some of my friends who are entering into the later parts of their careers, and I don't mean this from an age perspective, one of my friends is in their early 30s and they're already going towards retirement, which is wonderful. They started their own company very young, and they're already on the retirement track. So they're thinking about their legacy. And that's, I think, one way to measure the impact of a personal brand is what is the legacy that you leave behind? And that's the mindset that they're in right now. But I think for so many of us that are still working into an undetermined amount of time, I think that when we're thinking about the success of our personal brand, a lot of it comes down to goals. And also, what are our goals and how are we splitting up our goals? Do we have quarterly goals? Do we have yearly goals? And I'm asking these questions because I hope you do have both of these, right? I think it's helpful to think, in 3 months, what do I hope to accomplish with my personal brand? In 6 months, what do I hope to accomplish? In a year, what do I hope? And it's helpful then to not break it down into shorter amounts, because when you say, what am I going to accomplish with my personal brand in 2 weeks? That is a little bit too short of a time to have a real impact. In fact, this is a little bit of how a personal brand is really similar to SEO, where you need that time.
Right.
To let it develop.
So what are your favorite digital tools or platforms when you're helping introverts build their personal brands? What seems to work best?
Okay, well, I have to say, of course, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, sure you do.
We have to say LinkedIn because LinkedIn is the place to go. And there's so many different ways to build a personal brand on LinkedIn. So even if you have no other social media, LinkedIn probably is going to help you more with your career than other platforms. That being said, one of my friends is a business creator, and he has over, I think, 1 million followers on TikTok, and also, I think, 500,000 followers on Instagram. And because of that, his now LinkedIn has grown. So it's a fascinating kind of flowing into LinkedIn case study. The other platforms that I think are helpful are a couple of newer platforms. So there's Discord and Reddit. Both of them are slightly newer platforms. And Discord is helpful for when you are in conversations, private conversations, building communities. In fact, a new community program that I really like that I've been diving into and learning more about is Circle. And Circle is a really fascinating place where people are developing private paid communities right now. So I I'm not paid by them. I'm not sponsored by them. But I think that they're a fascinating platform to think about building your communities. Other platforms that I think are doing really, a strong job of being a place that an introvert could build a personal brand. Obviously, Substack is one of them. Being able to build a newsletter that is then sent out to so many people is very helpful. Obviously, building anything like a podcast on whatever platform podcasts are seen and heard on is also extremely helpful. And when I say Substack, of course, I include Medium and Beehive in that grouping. There's so many other platforms out there for making basically a modern day blog, a modern day podcast, a modern day newsletter. There's MailChimp is another place to build that. So these are some of the places I send people for more of the technical side of things. But I think anytime you can find places where your community exists, whether that's Discord or Facebook groups or even WhatsApp groups, I think that's very powerful.
You ever use some of the same content on different platforms?
Yes, absolutely. I think it would be really nutty to not repurpose content for different platforms. Mostly for videos, I don't necessarily re-edit videos, but for the physical words that I use to describe those videos, I will often tailor them for different platforms. So on LinkedIn, I'll do a longer caption because that seems like my audience really enjoys those longer captions on the platform. But on a platform like we were just talking about, a platform that I personally like, which is Threads, I will use a much shorter caption only because there's a word count cap on that platform. So I need to be more succinct regardless.
Right. So let's talk about entrepreneurs for a minute here.
Yes.
Entrepreneurship seems to be on the rise, and I think that's a good thing. In crowded markets, how can introverted entrepreneurs differentiate themselves? Some people might think that's a contradiction in terms, introverted entrepreneurs, but of course some entrepreneurs are introverted. How can they differentiate themselves?
So I think a lot of entrepreneurs are introverted because you don't necessarily need to be an extrovert to get a business license or build a business, especially a digital one. A lot of those steps don't require as much talking to human beings as they used to. But in order to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, it all comes down to what is your unique offering and what problem are you solving at the end of the day? And is it a problem that needs solving? Is it a product that people need? And especially, do they need it repeatedly over time? Or is it a product that you're making that's a lifetime product? And once again, at the end of the day, you need to have a very hyper-specific problem that you're solving. And you need to be the best solution for at least some of those people that have that problem.
And you need to talk in the language of your target audience.
Yes.
So, Goldie, how do you measure whether a piece of content is successful?
I think it depends on the goals of that piece of content. For some people I know, if their content doesn't go viral, right, and virality has many different measures, every single time they say, well, then that content didn't do well. I don't measure my content in that way. I measure my content in terms of what are the goals. If my goals are, since I have my book out, to get more people to have exposure to my book, or maybe my goals are to get people to actually purchase the book, whatever that CTA is, whatever that call to action is, I want to direct people towards doing that. And to me, that's more important than having 1 million views or having 1 million likes that don't convert to anything.
Right. So what trends in digital storytelling are you most excited about?
I am excited for a return to narrative content as opposed to off-the-cuff content, I suppose is the way to say that. So I'm really interested in seeing people tell more narrative stories, more long-form stories. I'm hoping we're going to go back to a version of it where we have more room in our brains to understand and to hear narrative stories, even if they're broken down into very bite-sized pieces. So I hope that that is a trend that we are going to see more of. And also, I think we are seeing at least narrative short form a lot more. We have people who are telling more of their personal stories as opposed to just doing, here's the list of 5 things to do tomorrow.
Sometimes I wish these platforms had on the screen, think before you type. that could be very helpful.
Yes.
So how do you coach people to show up on video if they're camera shy?
So I always think about a mechanical thing that I do, which is I tell people to, when they look at the camera, to imagine that it is a close friend or colleague, someone that wouldn't make fun of you, right? Because it doesn't work if you pick somebody that would.
Sure.
But you choose someone that is very supportive and you imagine that they're on the other side of the camera. And that's who you're talking to. And when you do this thought exercise, it creates that warmth in your person and it creates that ease that makes it a little bit easier to be on camera.
Right. Tell us, if you would, about Warm Robots. How did it start? What have you done? And what are you up to these days?
Yes. So it's so funny because everyone thinks my company is an AI company. However, I started it before the big AI boom, and Warm Robots, ironically, refers to Battlestar Galactica, which is a sci-fi show from the 1970s that had a resurgence in the 1990s.
Yeah.
So in the early 2000s. So one of my favorite shows of all time. It's a reference to that. It's also a reference to that in some ways it's helpful to be analytical but also human at the same time. So that's the combination of Warm and Robots. And now, once again, with the advent of AI, that's taken a whole new meaning. So it doesn't mean that. What have I been up to? So we've worked with large companies all over the world. We've worked with Adobe, Microsoft, Lego. We've worked with so many massive companies. We've worked with C-level executives and Fortune 50 companies to help them tell their personal stories better. And these days, what we're doing is we're doing a lot more of the behind the scenes work with strategy, helping individuals who are director level and above build their personal brands, but also helping some of these big companies think about how they are telling their stories, how they're building ambassador programs. I myself am in quite a few ambassador programs, so it is always helpful for me when I'm talking to companies about how they're building and encouraging the people that they work with to treat them like people, because everyone wants to automate everything.
Right.
And I'm definitely the first person who will say, instead of automating, have you thought about doing a handwritten note? Have you thought about talking to this person over the phone, talking to them in person, really having that high human touch to your interactions?
What a concept.
What a concept.
Yeah. Now, Goldie, on a more personal note, you are a cancer survivor. Tell us, if you would, what influence has that experience had on your approach to life in general, and specifically on how you manage your own personal brand?
So I would say that, so I was diagnosed with cancer in 2022. And prior to that, I think I had so much fear of missing out, so much FOMO. I was seeing some of my friends at the time, some of my colleagues get opportunities that I wasn't getting. And I started getting jealous and I started feeling like, why am I not there? Why am I not doing those things? And post-cancer, it's really shaken 90% of that from my body, from my person. I think a lot of times about how grateful I am to be working at all, how thankful I am to be able to run my business again, because I had to shut my entire business down when I was going through chemotherapy. There was no redundancies in place for me personally. And so it was easier for me to shut everything down and focus on my treatment. And I think now about how I take so many things less seriously, because at the end of the day, what truly matters is who loves you and who you love, who is around you, and who's going to be around that hospital bed when you are in treatment for cancer. And I've been there, so now I know who those people are.
Sure.
And I think so many of us, we don't think about that until we have a big thing happen in our life, a big, usually health issue or some massive life change. We don't think about who is surrounding us during those difficult times. And it's always, always the most important thing is the people and not the work.
Well, you're blessed to have that focus on what matters most.
Thank you so much.
Goldie Chan, thank you so much for joining us on Leadership. As Goldie reminds us, personal branding is not about becoming louder. It's about showing up thoughtfully, intentionally, and consistently, especially if you've been told your quietness is a disadvantage. Goldie's work reframes visibility as a form of self-expression rather than performance. And that shift has the power to change careers, communities, and personal narratives. As you step back into your own digital world, consider this question. What truth about yourself are you ready to let people see? Goldie's book is Personal Branding for Introverts. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team, your network, or anyone else who's ready to make better use of their time and attention. And be sure to leave a review. Even a single sentence fuels the algorithms that promote the great content that the Leadership podcast offers. And for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.